Good morning. Happy Thursday. I hope your hump day was wonderful. We're looking forward to Friday. I had an epiphany yesterday. I'm just laughing my ass off at my favorite little Dunning-Kruger, Wayne or Peter or whatever he wants to call himself. Hilariously misinterpreting, misunderstanding, insistent that he's right. Zero understanding of how the law works, of any of the underlying legal presumptions in anything, of the meaning of the terminology, using a layperson's understanding of words instead of a legal understanding of words. And I found that I was just finding that to be incredibly hilarious. I mean, he is a giant lol cow, the king of Dunning-Kruger, just so stupid and misinformed, and so 100% certain he's right. It's hilarious. Like, again, arguing with literal attorneys, actual practicing attorneys, and insisting that he's right and the attorneys are misunderstanding things. It's hilarious, right? But I had an epiphany. And so I'm going to tell you a little story about me. Take from it what you will. I grew up Protestant. My parents were Protestant, the evangelical kind of Protestant. They would go to Foursquare or Church of God or Assemblies of God or, whatever church they liked, right? I grew up in it. When I was young, I believed. And then as I got older, I started talking to people of other, I guess you'd call it denominations. One guy that I spent a lot of time talking to was a Seventh-day Adventist. They believe in the same Bible. They just have a prophet, I forget her name, from like the 1800s, I think. Something White. Anyway, I talked to this guy for like maybe 6 or 8 months, and we'd sit down and we'd do Bible studies together, and he would interpret the Bible one way. And I'm like, I understand how you get that interpretation, but I get a different interpretation, based on what my pastors had told me in the past. And eventually just broke down, our dialogue about religion broke down because ultimately neither one of us would agree to the other person's interpretation. Why would I respect his interpretation of the Bible, and why would he respect mine? Like, neither one of us was authoritative, and neither one of us could explain all the various seemingly contradictory passages. And so he provided interpretation for a passage, and I'd say, well, what about this passage? It contradicts what you're saying. And I'd give an interpretation, and he'd say, well, what about this passage? It contradicts what you're saying. And so there was no real getting to the crux of the issue. No real resolution. And I, became an atheist because, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that if you don't understand it, it doesn't make sense. It's seemingly contradictory. Anyway, when my wife was pregnant with our first child, she and I discussed wanting to give the child a moral base. Very much like Sargon of Akkad, I like the underlying moral aspects of Christianity. I like a society dominated by the underlying moral aspects of Christianity. It seems to make a good functioning society. I mean, it was a very pragmatic rationale for it, but I and my wife wanted our children to have some underlying basis for morality. And you need an underlying basis for morality. I remember debating with OG2 in my Discord. I don't know if any of you even remember OG2 at this point. He was a flash in the pan back from, what was that? That Texas situation where God, what was the name of that little town? A bunch of auditors went there to protest Salvaggio. Anyway, he was from back in those days, and he wanted to debate me on abortion. Now, I've never been pro-abortion, but I've understood the arguments on both sides, or at least I believe I did. And so I debated him on it. He took the anti-abortion position, so I took the pro-abortion position, and we got down to this situation where I was using the clump of cells argument, classic pro-abortion argument. What's the difference between a embryo and a clump of cells, like cancer cells, right? And he was saying, but it's human. And I'm like, well, any human cell is human. I mean, what is your metric? And he started arguing about, the embryo is human. It has a soul that's separate and distinct from mothers. And that's kind of where it ended because, how do you prove a soul, So we were at an impasse. We had a different moral basis for our arguments. Now, again, my basic underlying morality is formed by being raised Christian in a Christian household, Protestant, evangelical specifically. But I was atheist, and so, I made the argument. So because we didn't have the same morality, because we didn't have an understanding of the same morality, things went, we reached an impasse. So fast forward, my wife's pregnant. We start discussing, okay, so we need to, she was raised Roman Catholic. I was raised evangelical Protestant. So what church are we going to take the kid to? I was not going to take him to a Protestant church. I was raised Protestant. I know the problems with it. I don't want to go to a rock band service. I don't want 5,000 interpretations of scriptures. I don't want people getting up and going, or running around or flopping on the floor. I remember there was one time when I was in my young 20s, and I went to visit my parents, and they took me to this church they were going to, and people got up and were running around and falling on the ground in front of the stage. People are going up and ducking on them. And I'm like, these people are insane. And my mom's like, you're going to hell. It was insanity. I did not want my kids to deal with that. I didn't want that. Now, my wife was raised Roman Catholic, and she knew all the problems in the Roman Catholic Church. And those are the only two I really knew about at the time. So we hemmed and hawed, and it wasn't until after my second child was born that I figured out, just by, because I'm like, we got to get these kids going with a religion. If you raise them with it, it gets steeped into them, and they get the morality. And I really wanted the morality. I wasn't a believer, really. So I don't know why I'm going into all this background, but anyway, so I'd been researching, watching videos, and I came across the Eastern Orthodoxy, and there was a Eastern Orthodox church relatively near us. So I went to it, decided to become a catechumen, started believing in God. Crazily enough, never thought I would have done that. But one of the things that I had from being a Protestant was, everybody gets to interpret the scripture, and I don't understand how they get to these interpretations in Eastern Orthodoxy. How do you get that? Where does it say that? How did you read it that way? And I'm talking to my priest. And my priest obviously went to seminary. He's been a priest for a long time. And he's read all the church fathers. And he has an understanding. And he explains to me, well, this is what was going on in the Second Temple era of Judaism, which is when all the apostles and Jesus were, out there doing their thing. And so this is how they would understand it. And this is how the church fathers have understood it, and this is why. This is their explanation for it. And I had to stop using my layman's understanding, and I had to defer to his authoritative understanding because he understands it. He's been steeped in it. He practices it. He teaches it. In catechism class, he teaches it. He understands the underlying historical and theological and the arguments and the doctrines, and he understands it all. And he is, because of that, he's able to put things into context in ways that aren't obvious to a layman. And so I had to defer to him because he knows more. Which is, a blow to my pride. I figure I'm a relatively smart person and I have, the ability to read and understand. But it's not just that. You have to have the underlying knowledge. You have to have the underlying skill, practice, ability, experience that my priest has that I don't. Similarly, I have experience, practice, skill being an attorney. Other attorneys probably do too. Now, attorneys can disagree. Two attorneys can read the same passage of law and come to a completely different interpretation of it. But at the end of the day, their interpretations will be informed by their skill, their experience, their intelligence to understand it, their knowledge of the underlying laws. Like, one of the reasons why I don't really analyze the copyright aspects is because I don't have the relevant requisite skill, experience, knowledge, understanding that a copyright attorney would, that someone who actually deals with that would have. And so I defer to the experts on copyright. I am just a first-year family law attorney, but I've done a little bit of criminal, and I've analyzed a lot of cases. And I've done contracts, business, civil, obviously family law, probate. So I have a lot of knowledge of a lot of areas of the law, but in a lot of those areas, I'm not as good as an attorney who specifically practices, like a California probate attorney who does nothing but probate is going to have more underlying knowledge than me. Now, I could probably catch up. I could use the practice guides. I could use, a little bit of time researching to figure out the specific issues in the area I'm in. But if you threw just the two of us into a room and started asking random questions about how that area of law is, how it makes determinations, the relevant cases, the blah, 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 that other attorney is going to be probably better than me. So one of the skills, one of the lessons that people should learn in life is to understand the limits of their understanding. Understand that you should defer to qualified experts, especially if that expert has shown a history of being right about things. Geopolitics is one of those areas where geopolitics experts don't often have a statistically better chance of predicting the future than just random guessing. So, take it all with a grain of salt. But like doctors, they have an understanding. They have a underlying, literally understanding. They understand the basis. So you're not going to know more than your doctor does. 99 times out of 100, you're not going to know more than your doctor does. Your doctor is going to have a holistic understanding of doctoring. Your lawyer is going to know more than you. Your lawyer is going to have a more holistic understanding of the process. Don't argue with your lawyer about the law. You may correct him about factual misunderstandings, sure. You may argue with him about your bill, sure. But defer to your lawyer's understanding of the law. Defer to your priest's understanding of the Bible. Pastors, who knows? 9 pastors around a table, you'll have 10 ways to interpret Scripture. but defer to your priest, because they have a more holistic understanding of the Bible and the history and the church fathers, etc. So that's my little story for today. Do with it what you will. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.